great to have you all on this LinkedIn Writing Challenge. I'm very excited for those of you who are here and those of you who are watching the recording of this. We're going to whip through a bunch of things today, a little bit of housekeeping, a little bit of instruction, and a little bit of maybe housekeeping at the end. So hopefully you can take it all in. And if you have questions, feel free to jump in. Or if you're watching the recording of this, feel free to message us in the chat. Speaking of us, let me introduce Julie, who you can come on camera. That'd be great. She was on camera. There we go. All right.
Hey there. Wasn't expecting.
There you go. Surprise. So Julie, you'll have met in the chat as well. Julie is running operations for us. And so questions, feel free to just put them in the chat or reach out to Julie or I directly on LinkedIn. I think we're all connected. So feel free to go ahead and do that. Cool. That's Julie. Thank you, Julie. And let me start now sharing my screen. See if I can make this work here. All right, fingers crossed this works. Thumbs up, Julie, if you can see my PowerPoint. Awesome. Okay, fabulous. Thank you very much. Let's jump in. So welcome to live session 1 from the LinkedIn Writing Challenge. We're going to be doing a few of these. In fact, why don't I jump into that right now? I'm going to start with our agenda. So we're going to talk about what are the goals for this challenge, what to write about, what I call the writing ladder, some resources for you to use. I'm going to talk a little bit about the writing process that's going to hopefully make things easier for you. I'm going to talk about planning and your first post, and then we're going to wrap things up. We'll leave it open for questions at the end, but questions along the way as well. Don't be shy if you have something you want to know about or something's not clear. That's part of the point of this. So what to expect in the LinkedIn Writing Challenge in terms of our interaction, it's intended to strike a balance between, enough, but not too much. So there'll be a live session with instruction like this for 3 or 4 of the 6 weeks. We'll see how much we manage to cover in each one. And if there's topics that people really want to hear more about, we can potentially do that as well. One of the things we're doing differently this time is we're doing, to try and help people out, we're going to do a write together session, it's called. It's a Zoom session. We're going to do it on Sundays at 1. And so part of the idea is it's a time everyone can, we're all kind of doing it at the same time. It's a little bit easier, doing this stuff together. If you have questions, that's a good time to ask. And it's one of those things you can put in your calendar, and that way you don't have to try and figure out when to write. One of the hardest things about writing and about any new habit is most people approach it as, yeah, I'll do this sometime this week. And then listen, we're all busy with school and with work and with life and everything else. And you get to the end of the week, you're like, ugh, never had time to do it. The way to make this work, the way to maximize your chance of success is to find and select times that you're going to work on this. This is part of why we're doing this. This is a great way, 1 p.m. Sundays, join in the Zoom chat, get working on it, and you'll be amazed how much progress you make and how fast you can get things done. And then we're also going to do this a set of office hours on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on how the week's shaping out. I do have some work travel I've got to do, and I have client and other dinners I have to do periodically. So we're going to do Wednesday or Thursday for those. But that's sort of the interaction you can expect from this challenge. Okay, what prompted me to start this? I've done 150 plus by this point in the past year and a half, either coaching calls or interviews with students, informational interviews, coffee chats, that kind of thing. And I talk about writing on LinkedIn a lot. You're here probably because you're somewhat convinced. When I talk to guests for my podcast, credibility enhancement, differentiation, standing out, the whole 9 yards, those are things that they argue and they agree with are some of the big reasons to start writing on LinkedIn. What I found, though, was people would get to the point where they're like, yes, I'm ready, let's do this. And then they don't get there. There's this gap that exists, and that's what this is intended to fill. It's the idea that most students get stuck, and it's a combination of a few things why people get stuck. Number 1, not knowing how to start. Number 2, not knowing what to write about. Number 3, kind of being afraid nobody's going to read their stuff or respond. And then finally, people are worried, oh, what if I say something dumb or people perceive it as dumb? I hear and I see on social media how like nasty people can be. And so they also, well, I don't have it on here. One of the other things is they don't have a forcing mechanism. One of the nice things about a challenge like this is it creates this forcing mechanism to do this thing you want to get done. And so that's part of the point of this, is the ability to address and solve all of these problems. And so when I also want to think about what are our goals for this challenge. So number 1 is start building a library of interesting, valuable, beneficial, but also credibility enhancing content on your LinkedIn, because you want to have potential employers or recruiters or whoever you're trying to build credibility with, when they go to your LinkedIn, think, wow, that's interesting that this person is doing that. I'm surprised, one, that they have the initiative to do it, and two, that I'm impressed that they're building this knowledge and are genuinely seemingly interested in this topic. So that's one of the reasons we do this, and our goal. And another one is just to overcome that fear of publishing online, right? I remember my first couple of posts, I was really, really nervous, right? So he'd be like, okay, I read it, I've edited it, now go, wait, before I hit post, let me just read that again. And then I would read it again, I would change a word or something here, and then I would be like, okay, now I'm ready. And I would, be like, okay, let me just read it one more time. And so that fear of publishing online is one of the key things we also want to overcome. Now, we want to build this system, and I'm going to share ways with you of how to build lots of ideas and not come up with a lot of ideas to write about. We want you to have a powerful tool to make your resume stand out. We're going to talk about how to use this on your resume to help get you interviews, and then how to use what you've been writing to help get you the job from there. And then finally, you want to learn while writing. You want to have lots to discuss in interviews. And so that's, kind of as I just alluded to. And interestingly enough, the purpose of this is not building an audience. That might happen as a happy side effect of this, but that's not the principal goal for this. So what does success look like? I would argue the minimum viable product for this is to have 6 credibility building posts, podcasts, write-ups, explanations, analysis, whatever post you want to write about. That's what a minimum viable product is. That's what success in this challenge looks like: 6 credibility building posts. There's much more that you can do, but just doing this in and of itself is a huge win. And so one of the first things people will struggle with is what to write about. And let's talk about that a little more. And this is often a struggle at first for people. What feels very peculiar to people at first when they don't know what to write about is that it doesn't take very long before you end up in a situation where you don't have time to write about all of the things that you would like to write about. There's this phrase from a writing challenge that I did, where they say, the more you write, the more you write. And the idea being, as you write more, you start to come up with more and more ideas about what to write about. So it's like an accelerating process where you build inertia, and that helps. There are different ways to think about it. I like the framework of thinking about it as a writing ladder. I don't know who said this, but I found it to be a great idea, and I have thought about it further and expanded on it a little bit. So ground level is you're not writing at all, right? Level 1 is you're curating other people's work. So you're kind of like reporting, and this is where you are doing your takeaways from podcasts or articles you've read or books you've read about your field or about anything that you want to that is of value and of interest. Level 2 is sharing other people's work and commenting on it and kind of building on a little bit. I'm going to talk about more about each one in just a second, but that's what I would describe as level 2. And then level 3 is where you take information out from elsewhere and assemble it yourself. And you are sharing your own insights. You're not necessarily drafting off other people. Really, you're building on information and sharing your insights from that. So let's go to writing level 1. We can talk about podcasts. I view this as sort of the easiest on-ramp. If your goal is, I want to get 6 posts out, I want to make it as minimally time demanding as possible, get the most out of it possible still, the simplest way to do that is, so podcasts are the lowest intensity way to do this. And it's as simple as, and we'll be putting a template for this into the main Notion page. And so that's one of the things to keep an eye out for. It's really as simple as, let's say you listen to a podcast on Visa. You listen to a podcast on Visa and you say, just listen to a great podcast on Visa. Wow, I had no idea how strong their competitive barriers are. My 3 biggest takeaways were 1, 2, and 3. And I totally recommend you listen to this podcast. So it really can be as simple as that. And so that's kind of why I like podcasts as this low intensity on-ramp to this. And then you start to do that, you start to build the momentum. One of the, there's this idea out there of there's a math problem and there's a drama problem. A math problem is I don't know how to do this thing. Therefore, I'm going to go acquire the skills to do this thing. Great, problem solved. The other problem, which is more of a drama problem, is I know what I need to do, but I can't get myself down to do it. It's a psychological problem, challenge that a lot of people have, tons of people have, right? About procrastinating, about getting down to work, about staying focused, all of those things. And if you have a drama problem, you can have all of the skills you want. You can get all the information sent to you that you want, but you are still going to struggle with actually getting down to the work. And there's like we can go on for hours about this, but one of the really, really effective ways to address many of the drama problems is to start with something dead simple. So Atomic Habits, James Clear has written extensively, one of the most popular books on self-improvement out there right now. And so what he talks about is building your identity, and each little step you take is a vote for that identity. So for example, let's say you want to get fitter and you want to get to the gym. Going to the gym is great. You go to the gym once, no one would look at you and be like, or you wouldn't even look at yourself and be like, I'm a gym goer. I'm an athlete. I work out. You go, regularly for a week or two. Okay. That's, you're starting to make more votes for that identity. You do it over time and you become someone, you're someone who goes to the gym. And so there, that negotiation moment you do with yourself, and everyone will, I think, be familiar with this idea of that. I got to do this. I know I got to do it. Can I do it tomorrow? Can I do it a little later? It's a common thing, right? And what you want to try and be able to do is shift to a point where you're no longer negotiating with yourself. It's just something you do. People who have, my old boss he runs or swims pretty much every day. He runs like 5 miles, swims, I don't remember the distance. And for him, it's no longer a question of, should I go swimming or running today? It's a question, it's really just like, this is what I do. And so that is what we want to try to shift your identity to that of a writer. And the lower intensity ways, the easiest ways we can make that happen, the better your chances of being able to continue that approach. That's why I like podcasts. They're easy on-ramp. I like X, which is the former Twitter. It is a fount of knowledge. There are amazing amounts of people who are experts and who know a ton, who are experts in their fields, who generously share their knowledge. And so I strongly encourage people to cultivate good lists, right? I have a finance list. I have a natural resources list. I'm in the investment business, so these are things that are relevant for me. But you cultivate lists that are relevant for you, and that gives you a ton of content that you can write about while you're building knowledge. You can write about what you're learning in school, right? You've got, or whatever you're doing work-wise, or whatever your interests are. You can be learning about a different field that you could be, right? Let's say you're really interested in nuclear energy. That's going to be an example I give later. You can just write about what you've learned there. And then you can write about the most recent interesting thing you've read recently. And that sort of, it'll also help you approach reading differently and learning differently, because there's also a purpose for it as opposed to just arbitrarily consuming information. Okay, so what's level 2? Level 2 would be thinking about, like, how did this event happen? This thing that just happened. How did it happen? Why did it happen? What are some of the implications of it? That's something you can be writing about, and you don't have to start at level 1, by the way. You can just go straight to level 2 if you'd prefer to do this. You can share an article and then talk about your insights from it. That's the subtle difference from level 1. Level 1 is you share the article and you talk about what you learned from that article. Level 2 is you share that article and write about what the implications of that article are. They might not have read it or might not have said anything about it, but what are the implications? An example could be, one of the companies I've looked at is a uranium company for nuclear energy, and the supply demand environment in uranium is obviously pretty important to that. So let's say there's one of the biggest players in the industry. Let's say there's a flood at one of their mines and it takes supply down. Well, the article about that would inform you that this is the biggest company. It would inform you that there's this amount of supply reduced, maybe how long it would be out for. And so you could talk about, in level 1, talk about some of your takeaways from that, and list those things and talk about other important facts or knowledge you learned from that article. Level 2 is then talking about, well, what we know about supply and demand is blah, blah, blah. And these are some of the implications potentially to the supply balance. Maybe there's going to be insufficient supply to meet demand. What does that mean for pricing? What does that mean for new mine construction? All of those things. You're starting to write about implications to the article itself and to the facts that were provided. You can write about a macro versus micro view, and this is when I talked about learning in the previous slide. This is where, let's say we're using the example of energy production, right? You can write about this at a very macro high level of how many barrels of oil are consumed daily, what are they used for, and write a post about that. You have to gather some info from different places, and you're not curating information, but you're writing about something and pulling data. You could write another post. How does horizontal drilling work? So you got the macro and the micro there, and you can then write about everything in between. And a lot of this comes down to what problem are you trying to solve? So we know we're trying to build credibility. We know we're trying to be able to increase the likelihood someone notices our resume and selects us for an interview, and the interview turns into a job. But we're also looking for, is there an area you want to become more knowledgeable about? This is a super effective way to build your knowledge and become more knowledgeable in a certain area. This is one of the ways to do it. So let's keep going here. You can explain something. If you're interested in power generation, for example, you could write about how a natural gas power plant works. You could write about what makes nuclear an attractive alternative. What are the pros and cons of hydroelectric generation? And then geothermal. What are some interesting companies there? How does it work? How close are we to this becoming a more broadly viable energy source? So you can write about in detail something about all of these different areas. Now, level 3 is you're pulling together information you've acquired on a topic, and you're building on just that information to draw conclusions from it. So let's say we were talking about uranium production, for example. Let's say you taken a bunch of knowledge, you maybe written about, and these things kind of build on each other, right? So you could have started by talking about the supply change that comes from a particular mine getting flooded, and what the article is telling about. Then level 2 is writing about the implications. You could write another post because there might be another article about it. And then level 3 is you now take all of this information into account, and then you start writing about who are the key beneficiaries of it. You can write about what this might mean for demand for nuclear power and additional nuclear power facilities being built. You could write about the geopolitics of Western versus Chinese or Russian uranium supplies. Like, there's a whole range of things you can write about, and it's that combination and that building which really has the potential to set you apart. You can have an interesting conversation with ChatGPT about major players in your field of interest, right? So you could almost do like a version of a mind map. It's not quite a mind map, but it's the idea of like, who are the key players? You can create that to understand an industry better. Let's say we're talking about data centers, for example, for AI, right? So if you think about an AI data center, on one side of it is the use of it, the consumption of it, who's using it, what are they using it for? On the other side of it is what goes into it. What's the power supply? Where does that come from? What are the components? Yes, everyone knows about NVIDIA, but there's probably a lot. I can tell you for sure, there's a lot more to it. So you can sketch that out, interacting with ChatGPT, for example, and you'll learn a ton by doing something like that. And you can write about that. You can write about it in one post. You can write about it in multiple posts. Offshore energy is kind of another example where you could write about who are the major players. You can write about what are the inputs. You can write about who are their customers. You can do, competitive analysis even, which, again, solves all of the problems we talked about, plus you learn a ton. And this is where, you can really write a multi-part analysis of an industry. And I can promise you these sort of things help you stand out. You get into an interview and you have a reasonably deep understanding of the industry. And the way it works is when we write about something, we're forced to crystallize our thinking. We're forced to understand it better, because you'll start writing and be like, there's a gap in my knowledge there. I gotta go fill that gap. And so you will be able to build your knowledge, and you really will stand out in interviews as a result of it. And if you're really stuck, you can just write about, ask ChatGPT and interact with ChatGPT to figure out writing topics within your field of interest. So let's say, your interest is in offshore energy. Interact with ChatGPT and say, I'm trying to come up with ideas on what to write about. I'm really interested in offshore energy. Give me a list of 50 topics I can write about. And you'll be amazed what actually can come from that. Okay, let's keep going here. So resources available to you. I mentioned earlier, Koifin is a financial data system, and they have student accounts. So with your student email address, you can get access to that. Quarter is one of them, for me at least professionally, one of the most useful apps I found. And there's a free mobile version, which is great, which I use extensively. There's also, for students, if you use your student account, you have Quarter for Students, which basically gives you the full package, the professional version, at no cost. So that's something else to watch for. The reason Quarter is useful and Koifin can be useful is, even if you're not interested in finance per se, when you're learning about a business or an industry, let's take, for example, let's say we're talking about something in IT, because I think I noticed a couple of you are in IT, and you want to write about something within that field. Well, I mean, let's say you're curious about, for example, quantum computing, right? It's a topic that is going to be really relevant over the coming years, probably. We're still relatively early days. There's multiple technologies, multiple approaches. Well, you put all this stuff together, right? And you use ChatGPT to interact with it to get a picture of the landscape. You can get it to suggest accounts on X to follow or on LinkedIn. So you'll start to build a mosaic of knowledge from there. You can then, once you figured out who the companies are, you can use Quarter to listen to their quarterly calls. So what companies will do is, public companies, at least publicly listed companies, every quarter will do a conference call with investors and analysts to update them on what's happened in the previous quarter. Frequently, they will also do presentations at conferences, and those will be often recorded, and you can find those on Quarter. And what's great about those is they explain, not always, but often will explain the company, the industry, what they do, their technology, that kind of thing. And so even if you're writing about something like quantum computing, these theoretically finance relevant things actually could be really relevant for helping you right there as well. YouTube is an underused resource for this stuff, where there's two ways to approach it. Number one is, let's stick with quantum computing for just a second. You're going to get tons of great explainers on YouTube about it, and it can accelerate your learning there. You can also, what I found happens often is on X, once I start building a list of people who are pretty high quality in a certain field, they will occasionally put up YouTube links to either podcasts or videos that they have found interesting and useful. So by cultivating good lists, you'll be able to find that. This is a new one, and I am just starting to scratch the surface of it, but my nose is telling me this is going to be super impactful. I was playing around with Perplexity, their browser today, and what I did was I'm doing something similar in like once a week, give or take. In addition to my regular writing, I'm also doing a podcast takeaways type thing, and I made my notes from the podcast. Then I put that into, or I guess I should say, I went to YouTube, started listening to the podcast in the Perplexity browser. Then there's I think analyst or analysis or something like that. There's a button on the top right. And once you click on that, you can ask it questions about that podcast. You can ask it to give you a summary. You can ask it, what did the person say about this topic? You can ask about, what are the things that seem unusual or out of consensus around it. So, or differentiated views on it. So using that can help you, one, accelerate what you're doing, but two, build a broader knowledge. Notebook LM is really interesting. If you haven't tried it, I recommend that you do, because you can take in a few resources and it'll generate a podcast for you, and it can be an interactive podcast where you say, so let's stick with quantum computing. You can put a bunch of videos and a bunch of content people have written into Notebook LM, ask it, it'll automatically generate the podcast, but then you can interact verbally with questions to it. So let's say we're talking about quantum computing and it says, these are the main technologies. You can say, I didn't really understand how this one works. So you click the button or whatever, and you say, can you explain, I didn't quite understand how this technology works and how is it different than this technology in order to make the quantum computer work? And it'll basically grab all that info, and it will already have sort of indexed it, and it will give you an answer. And so your ability to learn and write about stuff really gets enhanced by that. For those of you who are students, you might have access to Bloomberg at your school. Again, that's another powerful tool. Let's talk about the writing process really briefly. Let me pause and just see if there's any questions at this point. Just jump in if you have any questions. Okay, hearing none, let's keep going. The writing process comes in basically 3 steps: research and outline, writing, and editing. These are 3 different things, 3 different processes, 3 different steps, and they are really best done separately. They are best done at different points in time. You'll get better results. It'll get done faster if you're approaching it in that way. So the way I do it is and how I integrate AI, because you may be wondering about that. The way I integrate AI is once I have a first draft, which is reasonably well done, I'll run it through a custom GPT that I built. So the GPT prompt was something like what you see in front of you here. And I'm going to have all these slides, by the way, in the main Notion page where you can find everything. In fact, I think I'm going to pull up that Notion page right now just so you can see what I'm talking about. So here we have the links to onboarding. Hopefully you've already done all this and seen all this. If not, please get through this. There's a reason we do all this. There's based in learning and best practices and how to help you maximize your chances of success in this challenge. So there is a reason we do this. It's not super intensive. So I really encourage you to make sure you walk your way through this. So that's the day 1 onboarding. Day 2 onboarding is here. We're going to have the live session and the slides here. I'm going to have the recording of this live session. We'll have the slides linked here as well. In here, we're going to have the templates that I'm going to be putting in. So those will be under resources. And then this is the page where your kind of personal hub. And so the way you're going to do this is you're going to, if for those of you who haven't done it, I know some of you have, so that's great. You're going to go up here. So this is mine. So I'm logged in. And so, but for everyone else, when you look at his webpage, you'll see something about duplicating here. When you duplicate that, it'll get copied into your Notion. And then what you do is you go share, and share, you then will share up here in this box up here with Julia and myself. And all of the instructions are in here. It's in the read me first section. But I decided, since we're here, I might as well show it to you. And so you'll get the live session replay on the slides here. You'll get the templates in here. Here's everyone's LinkedIn page. So make sure you're connected with everyone. And so you'll be able to like and comment and that kind of thing. Okay, great. So this is the GPT I used. Here's a huge, very helpful hack for school, for writing, anywhere and anything. Read it out loud. I was skeptical about this at first because it was like, well, I'm reading in my head. It's fine, right? When you read it out loud, you hear things that don't sound right. When you read it out loud, way more than if you're just reading it on the screen or reading it to yourself, you will notice words missing. You'll notice things that don't sound right. And so I really strongly recommend reading your posts out loud. And then once I like it, I will schedule it in LinkedIn. That's one of the other reasons for the onboarding too, is it walks you through that process and gets you to do it once. Okay. So I talked earlier about planning and scheduling. So listen, different approaches, but I would recommend something like this. And that's Sunday before one, assuming you're going to do the podcast approach or whatever, or research a topic or whatever you're going to do. Before one, do the research, whether it's listening to the podcast, gathering the information, whatever. Then at Sunday at 1, in the write with me or write together session, you would outline and start writing your post. And then hopefully you'll have finished in that time. It's a reasonable chance. It shouldn't take you more than an hour. Especially if you've done you've listened to it before, you researched topic before. And then what you do is you edit it during the office hours or the Zoom office hours on Wednesday or Thursday. And then within the confines of the structure, you're done. Mission accomplished. Minimum viable product out there. And so I strongly recommend that. And then you would schedule it on LinkedIn to be published Thursday morning. The rough evidence is that people are most typically on LinkedIn in the morning. And so if you want people to see it, that's a useful exercise. So your first post in day 2 onboarding, there's a post I'd like you to use, or I'd recommend you use. You're sharing that you're doing this challenge. And so that will start to draw a little attention, especially as you follow up with it. It's a good way to kick off posting. It lets people know what you're doing, so they'll pay attention. We can all like and comment on it. It gets the ball rolling, and selfishly, I'd love for you to do it because it does help more people hear about this LinkedIn writing challenge. But the other reason, this is actually the most important reason probably, is that public accountability is incredibly powerful. When we publicly say we're going to do something, it greatly increases the chances that we're going to do it. Okay, we're pushing right towards the end here. I'm just going to mention one other thing. So we have a ranking system and a prize for the winner, and the prize is going to be your money back for the course or for the challenge. So whoever comes in first based on this point system is going to get their $30 back. And so hopefully that's, a little bit of incentive, a little bit of competition. Every Friday we'll post who's ahead. And here's how the points work. So for doing your post, you get 10 points. For doing that Notion setup page and sharing with Julie and I, you automatically get 5 points, or you'll get 5 points for that. And one of the important subtleties about success on LinkedIn, not necessarily for audience building, partly for that, maybe that's an ancillary benefit, but partly because you want to get in the habit of using LinkedIn to maximizing the value for you. We're going to get into a session on just how to maximize value in LinkedIn, especially with your writing. We're going to get to that later. But commenting and liking other people's posts is very important. So some of you will have heard me say this before. I try to only do things that benefit me in multiple ways. For things like this where I'm doing, where I have a purpose for it, I would rather not do something that only benefits me very narrowly. I want to do things that benefit me in broad ways. That's part of why we're doing this, doing a ranking system for liking and commenting. There's one clear way is the more you like and comment on posts of people in your field, you will build your reputation. You will have a greater chance of getting noticed. You'll have a greater chance of getting inbound interest. And so it helps. So doing that helps there. Commenting on the posts of your peers in this course, in this challenge, is a really good way to help each one of us. We're all more likely, we all like hearing positive feedback and people responding to us. One of the things that really sucks is if when it's one of the hardest parts about starting to write online is that it feels super lonely, right? The joke, of course, is that people initially are like, oh my God, everyone's going to be reading it and they'll have stuff to say. And what if it sounds dumb and blah, blah, blah. You post and then you realize nobody even noticed. Nobody's commenting. Nobody's saying anything. Now, of course, don't go and say inflammatory and crazy things, but I don't think you're going to do that. And especially in the context of what you're writing about and curating knowledge to start with and podcasts and sort of writing about topics that are informative, you're probably not going to be in that territory of like inflammatory and controversial things. And so doing this, we help support each other. We increase the odds that each one of us is going to succeed. And so that's one of the other reasons I'm really encouraging people to like and to comment on people's posts. So there is actually, I think I inverted this. The meaningful comment should be 4 and just the regular comment should be 2. One of the things I found, which is, it is better than nothing, right? Is, I write a post and someone comments, hey, great post, Ashley. That's cool because one, at least there's some feedback for this person and they find out, oh, great, there's someone who actually read it, which is, makes the whole process a little bit easier, a little more encouraging. And then that's good, but much, much better is a meaningful comment. So let's say the example I gave about the post about Visa earlier. If your comment were to be something like a meaningful comment to that, might be, yeah, I didn't realize how strong the competitive barriers were either. It would be really tough, it sounds like, for someone else to come in and compete with them. It's like this much of a difference in terms of content, but you're thinking about it a little more. Another great one is, asking them a question because you're making a comment, or you can even say something like, wow, great post, and then ask them a question, which they then respond to. That's another way of driving engagement on the post. It sends a signal to LinkedIn that, there's interest in this post, and that's a good thing. We all kind of like that. And it also, by following up with a question they can answer, that would be, I would characterize as a meaningful comment. So that is it for today. This is how you can reach me electronically or reach us electronically. We're connected on WhatsApp. We're connected on LinkedIn. So hopefully, let me throw it open for questions first before I move on to sort of wrapping things up. We'll give it a second. Okay.
I just have a quick comment on visibility.
Please.
So if you go into LinkedIn under settings and you'll see visibility there, So everybody might want to take a look at their visibility and make sure that other people can see the post, not just your connections. And you have control over whether people share your information, if you're mentioned by others. These are the things you probably want to set on that might be turned off at this moment.
Okay, so I'm going to just go to my LinkedIn here and I'll share my page with you. Let's walk through that real quick just so everyone can see it. Give me a second. Okay. Julie, you can see my LinkedIn there? Am I sharing that?
Okay, yeah, I got it.
Okay, so you go settings and privacy, then visibility.
Yeah.
And then what do you select?
Scroll down.
Okay.
Visibility of your LinkedIn activities.
And so you want to set.
And discovery now.
Oh, actually, I want everyone to be able to see I'm on using LinkedIn. Okay. Which one should I be looking at there? When you're mentioned by others?
Yeah.
Okay. So all of these are kind of settings you want to do. Okay.
Yeah. And if there's any question, just let me know and I'll go in and see if I could not retweet, what do you call it? Repost. See if I can repost. If I can't repost, then you know that you don't have your settings on.
Yeah, that was actually what triggered this discussion in a previous cohort and in this cohort where Julie was unable to repost somebody's post.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Julie.
And if there's any confusion, at 1:00 tomorrow when we have the work together session, we can
Eastern. 1:00 Eastern.
Eastern time, yes.
We're going to make sure that's correctly set up in the invite. Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much. We're going to have the 1:00 writing session tomorrow, as Julie mentioned. Get the onboarding done, please, and get ready for that. And let's make this count. I mean, I'm really excited about being able to do this with people and sharing this with people and seeing the progress. But two, I'm really excited for what this can do for you. I don't see a lot of people doing this. And so I think this can really enable you to stand out. I think it can really help you out a lot. And I'm really excited for that. So hopefully you're excited as well and looking forward to connecting further. Let's wrap it up there. Thanks, everybody.